very warm welcome to everyone joining us on this live Zoom event this evening. I will start by thanking Camden Local Studies and Archives Centre, especially Tudor Allen, who approached Tagore Centre for a talk on Tagore and who has diligently kept in touch and liaised with us for the last few weeks in the run-up to this event. Thank you to Tudor and also to Nick Durant and Kate Brolly, who has helped us a lot, still here to help. We expect the audience to be diverse, some with knowledge and familiarity with Rabindranath Tagore's works, and some without. It is also not easy to do justice to introduce such a great poet in a short space of time. So we will attempt only to bring you some aspects of his life and his works. It is my pleasure now to introduce our participants from Tagore Centre UK. I will be pronouncing the names in the Bengali way, how they're pronounced in Bengali. Dr. Kollan Kundu, a well-known Tagore scholar and author of a number of books on the poet in English and Bengali. He is a retired teacher. Madhusri Dey Ghotok, a Tagore enthusiast, singer, and she has been associated with the Tagore Centre for more than 10 years now. She is a retired civil servant. Mamata Lahiri is a dedicated exponent of Tagore's music and a well-known name in London as a singer of Rabindra Sangeet. She is also a retired civil servant. Assisting Mamata Lahiri is her husband, Shunit Lahiri, who is an accountant and the chairperson of Tagore Centre UK. Sanjoy Dasgupta is an author and a journalist. He has quite a few books to his name in English and Bengali. He is a keen reader and reciter of Tagore's poetry. He will be reading some poetry today along with me, Srabuntika Dasgupta. I'm a teacher and leader in the further education sector in London and have been reading and reciting Tagore's poetry for many years now. Not present among the participants present in the meeting are some of the contributors. They are contributors to songs that will be played. Shunit Ghotok, who is an ardent music lover and exponent of Tagore's songs, a retired doctor and a trustee of Tagore Centre UK, and Rishi Banerjee, who is not present today, but he is well known in England as a singer of Tagore's songs or Rabindra Sangeet. We have also liaised with two others, Cheryl Moskowitz, a creative translator, and Shushmita Bhattacharjee. Cheryl and Shushmita have run creative writing workshops in the community and in schools based on Tagore's poetry. Shushmita will join us later today to share her experiences of working with young people, sharing Tagore's poetry with them. I would now like to hand over to Dr. Kundu, Dr. Kollan Kundu, to introduce us to Tagore. Who is Tagore and why is he relevant today?
Thank you. Good evening, viewers. This evening, I am going to talk about a man of many talents, Rabindranath Tagore. Tagore's entire works run into 28 fat volumes, like this one, of which nearly 10 volumes include his poetry, and the rest includes his short stories, novels and novellas, plays, and serious essays on philosophical, political, social, educational. However, it was through poetry Tagore is most elegantly expressed. He had produced more than 2,000 poems with extraordinary range, cadence, and content. Tagore was born in 1861 in British India in a place known Calcutta in a progressive and aristocratic family, where each member of the family had an artistic flair. He was the 14th child of his parents. His eldest brother was a poet, philosopher, and mathematician. The second eldest brother was a Sanskrit scholar and the first Indian member of Indian civil service. His another brother was a born musician, playwright, and theater activist. One of his sisters, too, was the first woman novelist and the first to edit. In such a creative household, Rabindranath's early years began. Under the watchful eyes of the servants. Servants were very strict, did not allow him to come out of his room and play outside. When the time was right, like so many children of his age, he was admitted to a school. Initially, he welcomed the occasion as if this would be his freedom from servants. Soon, however, he was frustrated to find that the detention in classroom was as bad as, if not worse than, confinement within the house. Gradually, he became a truant, developed an apathy for school, changing schools one after another. By the time he reached 17, he was family concerned about his career and decided to send him to England to get a professional qualification. Coming England, he was ultimately admitted to University College London, staying as a lodger in several households here in Camden. However, his total stay of 483 days in his first visit was wasted as he failed to obtain any academic or professional qualifications. He made another attempt in 1890, but the similar thing happened. In 1912, Tagore visited England for the third time, carrying with him his own English translation of poems in a notebook. Arriving in London, he handed over his notebook to his only English friend he knew, William Rothenstein, an artist and painter. Eventually, a collection of those poems was published entitled Gitanjali, first by India Society and later on by Macmillan. A year after the publication of the Nobel Prize for Literature on the merit of the single volume of verse, he was the first Asian to obtain the laurel. 2 years later, he was knighted by the King George V. 4 years later, in 1919, he renounced the knighthood in protest against the British government's mindless act of killing unarmed civilians at Jallianwala Bagh in Punjab. Tagore's next extraordinary creative expression was in his songs. In his lifetime, Tagore wrote and composed 2,500 songs based on Indian folk music and also from Western melodies. Tagore's song, Rabindra Sangeet, as it is called, is the greatest gift of Tagore to his people. In the worldwide Bengali diaspora, Rabindra Sangeet is a breathing presence. Incidentally, 2 of his songs are the national anthem of India and Bangladesh. Apart from poems and songs, Tagore was a powerful short story writer, often equal with writers in the West. His dramas and operas are equally expressive of humanism, social justice, opposing all kinds of fundamentalism. Finally, his paintings. At the age of 69, Tagore's creativity took a new turn. He started painting without any formal training and subsequently painted more than 2,000 canvases. Apart from his artistic creativity, Rabindranath Tagore was deeply involved in other faculties. The distressing experience in his limited schooling years inspired him to set up a school at Shantiniketan in 1901, 40 years later, as an alternative method of education. Tagore was extremely critical of the concept of nation and nationalism. Fear of nationalism in the West had created more divisions and thus more issues for survival. Humanity was one of the least concerns of the West at that point. It is in this context that Tagore rejected nationalism. After the First World War, while touring in the war-devastated countries of Europe, Tagore realized that the global peace would only be achieved when the East fellowship and through the free exchange of ideas between the two hemispheres. With this idea in mind, he founded in 1921 his own university, Visva-Bharati. The motto of the university was, "Where the mind meets in one nest," a meeting ground of many cultures, as he envisaged, and a learning center where the conflicting interests are minimized and where individual pursuit of truth. Tagore was a traveler. He traveled extensively within India and also in Europe, America, and Asian countries. In fact, 34 countries in 6 continents, spreading his humanistic ideas, which found an echo in the best minds of the West, namely Albert Einstein, Roman Rolla, Bertrand Russell, and many more. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you to Dr. Kundu for all the useful information about Rabindranath Tagore's early life and the writing of Gitanjali. I'm really sorry we had all the technical issues, but thanks to Nick for doing the transcriptions. We will now do some readings from Gitanjali interspersed with Tagore's songs or Rabindra Shungit. The songs are in Bengali while the readings are in English. They are translations by the poet himself from the original Bengali Gitanjali. I would now ask Sanjoy to introduce the readings to us.
As we heard there from Dr. Kundu, Tagore was a man of many talents. His creativity flew in many directions through many channels. However, he's primarily remembered as a poet and as a writer of some of the most wonderful songs that Bengalis live and breathe even today. It is through his poetry and music that Tagore primarily lives on. We will now do, as Sarvantika suggested, a selection of his songs. Now the songs have been selected, the poetry and the songs have been selected. They represent various moods. His messages of hope, of love, of harmony, his oneness with God. But primarily, Tagore was inspired, his creativity took roots in nature. He was primarily a nature poet. He was many things, but nature suffuses his poetry like very few other things do. As Sravantika suggested, the translations are the poems we will read are mainly from Gitanjali song offerings, but some are from other anthologies. It will be interspersed with songs. The poems, as I say, are suffused with the message of peace, which makes it particularly relevant. Gitanjali was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1913 because it came at a very strife-torn moment in Europe, when Europe was heading towards a conflict. And it's interesting that we go back to Tagore today again, when war is ravaging another corner of Europe. And his message of peace, of nature, of oneness with God is something we need to hark back to. I hand over to Sarvantika for the first read.
When the heart is hard and parched up. When the heart is hard and parched up, come upon me with a shower of mercy. When grace is lost from life, come with a burst of song. When tumultuous work raises its din on all sides, shutting me out from beyond, Come to me, my Lord of silence, with thy peace and rest. When my beggarly heart sits crouched, shut in a corner, break open the door, my King, and come with the ceremony of a king. When desire blinds the mind with delusion and dust, O thou Holy One, thou wakeful, come with thy light and thy thunder.
This is my prayer to thee, my Lord. Strike at the root of penury in my heart. Give me the strength lightly to bear my joys and sorrows. Give me the strength to make my love fruitful in service. Give me the strength never to disown the poor or bend my knees before insolent might. Give me the strength to raise my mind high above daily trifles. And give me the strength to surrender my strength to thy will with love.
The morning sea of silence broke into ripples of bird songs, and the flowers were all merry by the roadside, and the wealth of gold was scattered through the rift of the clouds, while we busily went on our way and paid no heed. We sang no glad songs, nor played. We went not to the village for barter. We spoke not a word, nor smiled. We lingered not on the way. We quickened our pace more and more as the time sped by. The sun rose to the mid-sky, and the doves cooed in the shade. Withered leaves danced and whirled in the hot air of noon. The shepherd boy drowsed and dreamed in the shadow of the banyan tree, and I laid myself down by the water and stretched my tired limbs on the grass.
My companions laughed at me in scorn. They held their heads high and hurried on. They never looked back nor rested. They vanished in the distant blue haze. They crossed many meadows and hills and passed through strange, faraway countries. All honor to you, heroic host of the interminable path. Mockery and reproach pricked me to rise, but found no response in me. I gave myself up for lost in the depth of a glad humiliation, in the shadow of a dim delight.
The repose of the sun-embroidered green gloom slowly spread over my heart. I forgot for what I had traveled, and I surrendered my mind without struggle to the maze of shadows and songs. At last, when I woke from my slumber and opened my eyes, I saw thee standing by me, flooding my sleep with thy smile. How I had feared that the path was long and wearisome, and the struggle to reach thee was hard.
The next two poems are ones which Tagore wrote as poems and then set to music as songs. You will hear both. First, the poetry in English, and then the song in the original Bangla. The sky pours its light into our hearts. We fill the sky with songs in answer. We pelt the air with our notes. When the air stirs our wings with its madness, O flame of the forest, all your flower torches are ablaze. You have kissed our songs red with the passion of your youth. In the spring breeze, the mango blossoms launch their messages to the unknown, and the new leaves dream around all day. O Shirish, you have cast your perfume net round our hearts, drawing them out in songs.
আকাশ আমায় ভরলো আলো, আকাশ আমি ভরবো গানে, সুরের আবির হানবো হাওয়ায়, নাচের আবির হাওয়ায় হানে, আকাশ আমায় ভরলো আলোয়। ওরে পলাশ, ওরে পলাশ, রাঙা রঙের শিখায় শিখায় দিকে দিকে আগুন জ্বালাস, আমার মনের রাগ রাগিনী রাঙা হলো রঙিন তানে, আকাশ আমায় ভরলো আলোয়, আকাশ আমি ভরবো গানে, সুরের আবির হানবো হাওয়ায়, নাচের আবির হাওয়ায় হানে, আকাশ আমায় ভরলো আলোয়। হাওয়ায় কুসুম বনের বুকের কাঁপন থামে না যে, নীল আকাশে সোনার আলোয় কচি পাতার নূপুর বাজে, ওরে শিরিষ, ওরে শিরিষ, মৃদু হাসির অন্তরালে গন্ধ জালে শূন্য ঘিরিস, তোমার গন্ধ আমার কণ্ঠে আমার হৃদয় টেনে আনে, আকাশ আমায় ভরলো আলোয়, আকাশ আমি ভরবো গানে, আবির হানবো হাওয়ায়, নাচের আবির হাওয়ায় হানে, আকাশ আমায় ভরলো আলোয়, আকাশ আমি ভরবো গানে।
I know not how thou singest, my master. I ever listen in silent amazement. The light of thy music illuminates the world. The life breath of thy music runs from sky to sky. The holy stream of thy music breaks through all stony obstacles and rushes on. My heart longs to join in thy song, but vainly struggles for a voice. I would speak out, but speech breaks not into song, and I cry out baffled. Ah, thou hast made my heart captive in the endless meshes of thy music, my master.
গান করো হে গুণী, আমি অবাক হয়ে শুনি, কেবল শুনি তুমি কেমন করে গান করো হে গুণী। সুরের আলো ভুবন ফেলেছে, সুরের হাওয়া চলে গগন বেয়ে, পাষাণ টুটে ব্যাকুল বেগে ধেয়ে বহিয়া যায় সুরে সুরধুনি, তুমি কেমন করে গান করো হে গুণী। আমি অবাক হয়ে শুনি, কেবল শুনি তুমি কেমন করে গান করো হে গুণী কেমন করে গান করো হে গুণী মনে করে অমনি সুরে গায় কণ্ঠে আমার সুর খুঁজে না পায় কইতে কি চাই কইতে কথা বাঁধে হার মেনে যে পরাণ আমার কাঁদে আমায় তুমি ফেলেছ কোন ফাঁদে চোদিকে মোর সুরে জ্বালবুনি তুমি কেমন করে গান করো হে গুণী আমি অবাক হয়ে শুনি কেবল শুনি তুমি কেমন করে গান করো হে গুণী
Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high.
Where knowledge is free.
Where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls.
Where words come out from the depth of truth. Where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection.
Where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit.
Where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action.
Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake.
Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Thank you, everyone, for listening patiently. Can I now ask Nick, can I request Nick to play songs 3 and 4 for us, please?
Yes, of course. Just one moment, everyone.
Sure.
I roam about alone, a soul, in the midst of the great world, under the great sky, following eternal time and wonder. You are, O Master of the world, within the cocoon of perpetual mystery, distinctly silent in your awe-inspiring abode, in this unending world of time and space. In these endless bright spheres of assortment, you are staring at me while I stare at you. When it is you in front and I continue to be within you, lonesome, daring, all noises fade away, tranquil prevails everywhere. মহাবিশ্বে মহাকাশে মহাকাল মাঝে আমি মানব একাকী ভ্রমি বিস্ময়ে মহাবিশ্বে মহাকাশে মহাকাল মাঝে আমি মানব একাকী ভ্রমি বিস্ময়ে ভ্রমি বিস্ময়ে তুমি আছো বিশ্বনাথ অসীম রহস্য মাঝে তুমি আছো বিশ্বনাথ অসীম রহস্য মাঝে নীরবে একাকী আপন মহিমা নিলয়ে মহাবিশ্বে মহাকাশে মহাকাল মাঝে অনন্ত এ দেশ কালে অগণ্য এ দীপ্ত লোকে তুমি আছো মোরে চাহি আমি চাহি তোমা পানে অনন্ত এ দেশ কালে অগণ্য এ দীপ্ত লোকে তুমি আছো মোরে চাহি আমি চাহি তোমা পানে স্তব্ধ সর্ব কোলাহল শান্তি মগ্ন চরাচর স্তব্ধ সর্ব কোলাহল শান্তি মগ্ন চরাচর এক তুমি তোমা মাঝে আমি একা নির্ভয়ে মহাবিশ্বে মহাকাশে মহাকাল মাঝে আমি মানব একাকী ভ্রমি বিস্ময়ে ভ্রমি বিস্ময়ে ধায় যেন মোর সকল ভালোবাসা প্রভু তোমার পানে তোমার পানে তোমার পানে যায় যেন মোর সকল গভীর আশা প্রভু তোমার কানে তোমার কানে তোমার কানে চিত্ত মম যখন যেথা থাকে সাড়া যেন দেয় সে তব ডাকে
যত বাঁধন সব টুটে গো যেন প্রভু তোমার টানে, তোমার টানে, তোমার টানে। বাহিরের এই ভিক্ষা ভরা থালি এবার যেন নিঃশেষে হয় খালি, অন্তর মোর গোপনে যায় ভরে প্রভু তোমার দানে, তোমার দানে, তোমার দানে। হে বন্ধু মোর, হে অন্তর তর, এ জীবনে যা কিছু সুন্দর, হে বন্ধু মোর, হে অন্তর তর, এ জীবনে যা কিছু সুন্দর সকলি আজ বেজে উঠুক সুরে প্রভু তোমার গানে, তোমার গানে, তোমার গানে। ধায় যেন মোর সকল ভালোবাসা প্রভু তোমার পানে, তোমার পানে, তোমার পানে।
Thank you very much, Nick, for sharing those. The two songs were rendered by Dr. Shunit Khatuk from the Tagore Centre. We will now go to Madhusri De Khatuk for a talk on Tagore's time in England.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all here today. You've had a pen picture of Tagore's life and works from Dr. Kundu. I'm going to give you glimpses of his stay here, a little bit more detail. Rabindranath Tagore visited England several times. And he was here in UK in 1878-79 and again in 1912-13 when he spent some time in the borough of Camden. First, let me tell you about the culture shock he faced. At the grand old age of 17, Rabindranath came to England for the first time to fulfill his family's expectation of him obtaining a professional qualification. For the shy, introverted boy with no knowledge of the world except what he had gleaned from books, this was a culture shock, if ever there was one. On first arriving in the winter of 1878, he found London to be cold, foggy, and dark, and the frantic pace of life to be depressing. This bookish boy had assumed that this small island to be reverberating with Tennyson's poetry or discourses on Carlyle. However, to his surprise, and perhaps a degree of disappointment, People here led ordinary lives, and ordinary people seemed unaware of either English or Bengali poetry. He attended several debates in the Houses of Parliament, but was surprised to find that Parliament was not really engaging with speakers who talked of Irish or Indian issues, and was astonished that people here considered him to be naive, not expecting him to know about things like cameras or photography. In his memoirs, he remembered with particular interest the beggar and the porter, who both ran after him, thinking that he had overpaid them. His beginnings here were a little gloomy, but things improved soon afterwards. For a while, he lived with his sister-in-law and her children in Brighton in Hove. Incidentally, a blue plaque has been installed recently at 7 Ship Street, Brighton in Hove, commemorating his school days there. He did not learn very much at the school, but attended dances and tea parties in English homes and spent entertaining his niece and nephew. He absolutely loved his first experience of snow and the English seaside. He also took the opportunity to attend festivities in the spring and summer of 1879. He was happily whiling away his time and generally enjoying himself. He did find some of the British customs to be alien. For example, he found it impossible to eat when faced with a whole cooked animal. He noticed girls flirting, but was prevented by his Bengali upbringing and his shyness from joining in. But he was impressed by the easy contact between men and women, a far cry from the restrictive culture of Bengal. He was equally impressed by the absence of excessive control over younger generations by the elders. While he did not take to European classical music, ballads impressed him. His guardians, realizing that the purpose of further education was not being served, relocated this young boy to digs in Regent's Park in the borough of Camden in the middle of winter. In his memoirs, he remembers the loneliness of that time and the cold and frozen Regent's Park. Fortunately, eventually he was placed as a lodger with Dr. Scott and his family at 10 Tavistock Square in the borough of Camden. Throughout his life, he remembered the happy times he had spent with this family. He particularly cherished the memory of Mrs. Scott, who bestowed motherly love upon him, and Lucy Scott, one of the Scott girls that he became close to. He retained his Indian habit of daily baths in cold water throughout winter, much to Mrs. Scott's consternation. While he lived with the Scotts, he was admitted to University College, London, in the borough of Camden, in the Faculty of Arts and Law. One of the tutors was Mr. Henry Morley, an inspirational teacher whom Rabindranath paid homage to in his later writings. Incidentally, the Tagore Centre UK very proudly installed a bust of Rabindranath Tagore in Gordon Square in the borough of Camden in 2011. Rabindranath attended classes for a few months, but before he could make any headway with his English educations, his guardians instructed him to return to India, and that was the end of any hope of a professional qualification. Let me now tell you about Rabindranath's singing. Rabindranath had always sung, but during his first visit to England, his public singing was a disaster. The assembled guests could barely conceal their laughter behind polite handkerchiefs. Much later, he recalled with amusement an ordeal from his first visit when he must have regretted his ability to sing. At the request of a lady, he set her sad poem to Indian classical music. He was not impressed with the result, but she insisted that he sing this dirge at every opportunity. Once, very reluctantly, he accepted her invitation to attend a dinner and dance party where he would be required to sing this same song. On the stormy night of the party, he got the wrong train and was of course very late in arriving and very hungry as he hadn't eaten since he left home at 10 a.m. Although he explained his reason for his tardiness to the host, he was offered only tea and biscuits before he was ushered in to dance with the elderly ladies present. He was too shy to ask for food and too polite to decline the invitation to dance. I cannot imagine what this hungry and tired 17-year-old must have felt at this point. At the end of the evening, the host sent him to an inn for the night. The cold and sparsely furnished inn would have been bearable had there been some food on offer, but there was no joy on that score. He returned to the home of his host for a breakfast of cold meats and remarks ruefully that it would have helped if these cold cuts had been available the night before. To add salt to his wound, he was then asked to sing the dirge for a guest who was behind the closed doors of a bedroom, and he stood outside singing. What a relief it must have been for Rabindranath to return to the care and comfort of the Scott household. By the time he returned to England in 1912, he was a renowned and popular singer and sang his own compositions at various gatherings to warm receptions. In 1890, he saw a musical in Savoy Theatre and was very impressed. A small number of his compositions are inspired by Irish and Scottish ballads. I'd like to tell you the story of Gitanjali and the Nobel for Literature. It is a sobering thought that Rabindranath might never have received the Nobel for Literature except for his illness and the efficiency of the Lost Property Office in Baker Street. In March 1912, Rabindranath was to visit England, but fell ill on the day he was to board the ship. His doctors advised total rest, and so he retreated to his estate in Shilaidaho, which is now in Bangladesh. As he was under strict orders not to do any new writings, he started rewriting some of his own poetry in English, almost to while away the time. Rabindranath eventually came to England in June 1912, bringing with him the notebook containing the English poems. This notebook was unfortunately left behind in the London Underground on the first day, and it wasn't until the next day that thankfully it was found in the Lost Property Office in Baker Street. So had Rabindranath not become ill, he may have never embarked upon rewriting his poems in English. And had the Lost Property Office not kept it safe, that precious notebook might never have seen the light of day. And the book of English verse named Gitanjali might never have happened, and Rabindranath may never have received the Nobel for Literature. Being unsure of his ability to write in English, Rabindranath had virtually kept the work a secret, even from his closest friends. Once settled in number 3 Villas on Heath, Vale of Heath, Hampstead, London, NW6, there is now a blue plaque at this address, by the way. He continued rewriting his own poetry in English, and he showed this notebook to his friend, the English artist, William Rothenstein, who was part of the intelligentsia of London. Rothenstein was immeasurably impressed by these English poems and showed them to W.B. Yeats, Andrew Cecil Bradley, who was a professor of poetry in Oxford University, and to Stopford Brooks, who was a writer. All were very, very enthusiastic. Later in the year, these poems were published in a book form named Gitanjali, meaning Song Offerings, by India Society, with an introduction by W.B. Yeats. The success of this publication inspired Macmillan's, the high street publisher, to print the book, 11 prints in all, each print selling out immediately. Before the publication of Gitanjali, some literary figures knew of Rabindranath. After the publication, he became a household name in England. Between May 1913 and the end of June 1913, Rabindranath stayed at 37 Alfred Place, Camden, London WC1, continuing to write in English and Bengali to much critical and very public acclaim. But not everybody was bowled over. George Bernard Shaw said, "The old Bluebeard, I wonder how many wives he has." During this time, Rabindranath delivered many lectures and readings of his own translations of poems and other works in Caxton Hall, in Oxford, and in other places. His play, The Post Office, staged for the first time ever, was in Dublin in May 1913, and again in the Court Theatre, Sloane Square, in July 1913. All this time, the book of verse, Gitanjali, was being translated in various European languages, including Swedish. Rabindranath returned to India in September 1913. The poet Thomas Sturge Moore, who was a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, recommended Rabindranath's name to the Nobel Board. That year, there were 28 nominees for the Nobel for Literature, including Thomas Hardy and Anatole France. Rabindranath was awarded the Nobel by a majority vote of 12 out of 13 on 13th November 1913. The news of this first non-European being awarded the Nobel for Literature was lauded by most, but there were a few dissenting voices, and a particular sore point was that the award had eluded Thomas Hardy. Some had great difficulty with the name, and I quote here a little ditty carried by the Evening Standard and St. James's Gazette. "He is worthy of all the fame, so I feel much to blame in owning to my shame I can't pronounce his name." Rabindranath used most of the prize money, nearly £8,000, for the upliftment of the poor in the Tagore estate and for the benefit of his school in India. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madhusridi Ghatak, for the lovely vignettes and anecdotes on Tagore's life while he was in England and his struggles as a young man in a new country, which might resonate with many. We have a very engaged audience from all the twitterings that are going on in the chat. First now, I'm going to attempt to play a song by Rishi Banerjee, who is not in the meeting, but who has contributed to the song. The relevance of the song is that it was composed by Tagore while he was in England.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now go to our last section. So we will go to Shushmita, Shushmita Bhattacharya, who's here with us today. She has worked with young Brits in creative writing workshops on Tagore. So we will go over to her for a talk. And also, Shushmita, the film that you're going to show is with Nick. So when you want that played, if you could just request Nick to play it. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Hello and namaskar. I'm Shushmita Bhattacharya. And just to introduce myself, I'm a novelist, short story writer and poet, and I am a creative writing lecturer at Winchester University. But I also work with young people, young writers in Southampton with Artful Scribe, which is a literature development organization based in Southampton. And we work across Hampshire and Dorset, providing creative opportunities to the community and people of all ages. And I lead the Mayflower Young Writers workshops for young people from the age of 7 to 15 at Mast Studios in Southampton. To commemorate World Poetry Day, which is on 21st March 2022, Mayflower junior writers who are aged 7 to 10 and Mayflower young writers aged 11 to 14 worked with poet Cheryl Moskowitz on creative translations in response to Kagujir Noku or Paper Boats by Rabindranath Tagore and Gift by Polish-American poet Czesław Miłosz. Taking inspiration from these poets, the groups wrote their own poems, which will be displayed at the Mast Cafe area. So if you are in Southampton on the 21st of March, then please do go to the Mast Studios and you'll see all the interpretations of Tagore's poem there. Our assistant, Beth McKeeman, writes in the Artful Scribe blog, we are influenced by all the languages and cultures around us, as the English language itself is. As is often quoted, English is a language that lurks in dark alleys, beats up other languages, and rifles through their pockets for spare vocabulary. We find roots for words from Latin, German, French, Norse, Japanese, Sanskrit, and so many more. Our groups of young writers included their own mother languages in the poems they wrote, and these included Bengali, Hindi, Gujarati, Russian, Arabic, Czech, Pashto, Albanian, French, Japanese, and more. After Cheryl's workshop, I was really so surprised. I didn't know that Cheryl was going to do Tagore's Paper Boats, and I had the opportunity to read the poem out in Bengali to the group, which Cheryl, she didn't know that I was Bengali. So it was a really nice sort of surprise for us both. And I read the poem out in Bengali, and the young people got a chance to listen to it in its original form. And we also looked at the English transliteration that was kindly provided by Dr. Kundu, and they managed to have a look at the poem in that form as well. So inspired by Cheryl's workshop, my daughters and I then created a video, which we will look at shortly. And this was in preparation for another presentation that I was going to do for another group that I belong to called Robimoy. So the transliteration by Dr. Kundu was performed by my elder daughter, Rohini, and my younger daughter, Mihika, and myself. We wrote a response to the original poem. Mihika did the English part of it, and I did the Bengali part as featured in the second part of the film. So this film was a contribution to our Saraswati Pujo program conducted online by Robimoy. Robimoy is our own homegrown Rabindranath Tagore appreciation group. We are kind of based around Winchester, Southampton area. And before lockdown, we used to meet every once in a while in somebody's home and sing Rabindra Sangeet. But during lockdown, we started meeting weekly online, and our Sunday afternoons were spent singing songs, reading poetry, and talking all things Tagore. And this was one of the most memorable experiences that I enjoyed over lockdown. I hope you will enjoy our little presentation, and do visit the Artful Scribe blog to have a look at it in more detail, the process that Cheryl took us through, and to read about our other projects as well. And do visit Robimoy's Facebook page to enjoy our virtual programs. I will put the links in the chat, so if you want to have a look later, please do. And I would thank you everyone for listening, and I would request Nick, please, to play the video. Thank you.